Have you ever noticed how the same wounds keep appearing in your life, dressed in different faces? Why the hands that hurt you seem to find you, no matter how far you run. You build fortresses against the pain, yet somehow, the arrows still find their way through the smallest cracks in your armor. Perhaps you've wondered if there's something about you that attracts this suffering. A hidden gravity pulling these familiar hurts toward you over and over again. We all carry maps of pain etched deep within us. Charts of old wounds that guide us unknowingly toward the very things we fear. The hands that hurt us in childhood become the hands we reach for in adulthood. This is the shadow dance that Sigmund Freud unveiled, the repetition compulsion. Our unconscious drive to revisit old wounds, hoping this time, somehow, the story might end differently. We return to what hurts us because the familiar pain feels safer than the unfamiliar possibility of healing. The devil we know becomes the partner we choose, the job we tolerate, the friendship we cannot leave. Freud saw this pattern in his patients, how they would recreate childhood traumas in their adult lives, not because they wanted suffering, but because they were trying to master what once mastered them. You did not choose this pattern. It was inscribed in you before you had words to name it. Before you understood that love shouldn't hurt, that attention isn't always care, that loudness isn't always strength. The child who was abandoned becomes the adult who chooses partners who cannot stay. The child who was controlled becomes the adult who either controls others or surrenders all boundaries. The wounds repeat themselves with mathematical precision, as if some cosmic algorithm keeps returning you to the same emotional coordinates, disguised in new situations, new faces, new promises. But here lies the first ray of light breaking through. Awareness of the pattern is the beginning of its dissolution. To see the repetition is to hold the first key to your freedom. What if the people who hurt you were never meant to be your prison, but your classroom? What if each repetition was not punishment, but an invitation to finally heal what was broken long ago? In the silent spaces between trauma and healing lies a revolutionary truth. You can break this cycle. You can step outside the script that was written for you before you could even speak. The unconscious speaks in patterns. It doesn't use words but rather situations, attractions, and invisible magnetic pulls toward what feels hauntingly familiar, even when that familiarity hurts. This is why logic alone has failed you. You've told yourself 1,000 times not to choose what hurts, yet found yourself walking through the same door, extending your hand to the same pain. Beneath conscious awareness, your deepest self has been trying to return to the scene of the original wound, not to suffer again, but in a desperate attempt to finally write a different ending. The child who could not defend against a parent's rage becomes an adult who finds rage everywhere, recreating the battlefield where they once had no power, hoping this time to emerge victorious. This is the unconscious mission, to return to the wound with new strength, to face the old ghost with new weapons, to finally say what could not be said when you were small and voiceless. But there is a fundamental error in this unconscious strategy. The past cannot be rewritten through repetition. The closure you seek cannot come from recreating the very conditions that broke you. True liberation comes not from winning a battle you lost in childhood, but from recognizing you no longer need to fight it at all. The war is over when you choose to leave the battlefield. What would happen if you stopped looking for healing in the same hands that created your wounds? If you stepped outside the circle that has contained your life for so long? Imagine the moment when you finally recognize the pattern as it begins to unfold. When you feel the familiar pull toward what hurt you, But this time, you pause. You breathe. You see. In that space between stimulus and response lies your power. The ability to say, "This is old pain calling. I recognize its voice, but I no longer need to answer." When you start to untangle yourself from repetition, you'll feel disoriented at first. The unfamiliar territory of health can feel more frightening than the well-worn paths of your suffering. This is why so many return to what hurts them. The unknown possibility of genuine love and respect can feel more terrifying than the pain you've learned to navigate and predict. The first step beyond repetition is radical honesty with yourself. To trace the outline of your wounds without shame. To name the patterns that have defined your relationships with merciful clarity. Look at the people who have hurt you. Not their words or promises, but their actions. See how they echo figures from your past. How the same emotional notes keep playing, just in different octaves. Now, here is where courage enters. To recognize that what feels like love might actually be familiarity. What feels like fate might simply be the unconscious seeking what it knows. The body keeps the score, as trauma researchers tell us. Your nervous system has learned to interpret certain forms of mistreatment as normal, perhaps even as evidence that you matter. This is why criticism can feel more believable than praise. Why tension can feel more like home than peace. Why some part of you distrusts situations and people who treat you well. Your task now is to retrain your entire system. To teach your heart that it deserves tenderness. To show your mind that respect is not suspicious. To convince your body that safety is not a trap. When someone treats you with consistent kindness, notice the discomfort that arises. The voice that whispers, "This can't be real." This discomfort is the sound of your old patterns beginning to dissolve. The healing journey requires you to become a cartographer of your own darkness. To map the terrain of your wounds with compassion rather than judgment. To understand rather than to blame. Within your repeated patterns lies critical information, not evidence of your brokenness, but clues about what needs healing. Each repetition points exactly to where your work lies. If you keep choosing partners who disappear when you need them most, the work is not to find someone who stays. It's to heal the part of you that believes love means abandonment. If you're repeatedly drawn to those who use your vulnerabilities against you, the work is not to find someone trustworthy. It's to heal the part of you that believes exploitation is intimacy. Now, as you begin to see these patterns with new eyes, something remarkable happens. The people who would hurt you become instantly recognizable. Their familiarity becomes a warning, not an attraction. You'll notice how quickly they find the cracks in your boundaries. How effortlessly they speak to your unhealed wounds. How they offer precisely the drama that your repetition compulsion craves. But now, armed with awareness, you recognize the old script beginning to play. And for the first time, you possess the power to set it down and walk away before the damage repeats. This is not about becoming perfect or never making mistakes. It's about refusing to be an unconscious actor in a play written by your past. It's about claiming authorship of your own story. As you practice this awareness, you'll witness a profound shift in who appears in your life. People who cannot respect your boundaries will find you suddenly uninteresting. You've changed the frequency you broadcast. Those who sought you for your wounds will vanish when they discover your healing. Their disappearance is not your loss, but your liberation. They were never there for your wholeness. Meanwhile, new faces appear. People capable of meeting you in health rather than trauma. People who don't need you broken to feel powerful. People who recognize your strength rather than exploit your wounds. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. The unconscious relinquishes its patterns slowly, testing to see if you're serious about this new direction, tempting you back to familiar suffering. There will be moments when the old pull feels overwhelming, when loneliness makes the toxic familiar seem better than solitude, when fear whispers that perhaps this is all you deserve. In these moments, remember, the temporary pain of growth is infinitely gentler than the permanent pain of repetition. The discomfort of change is kinder than the suffering of stagnation. What awaits you beyond repetition is not perfect happiness, but authentic living. Not the absence of all pain, but the presence of meaning. Not constant bliss, but sustained dignity. Imagine a life where your choices emerge from present awareness rather than past conditioning, where your relationships reflect who you're becoming rather than who you've been wounded into being. This is the promise hidden within Freud's insight. The repetition compulsion, once recognized, loses its power to determine your life. What was unconscious becomes conscious. What was fate becomes choice. As you continue on this path, you'll discover something remarkable about the people who once hurt you. Their power diminishes not because they change, but because you no longer need them to. If this journey of breaking free from repetition resonates with you, know that you've already begun. Awareness is the essential first step, and you've taken it simply by recognizing your patterns. Remember that healing is not linear, but spiraling. You'll revisit old territories, but with new perspectives. What once devastated you becomes data. What once defined you becomes just one chapter. The day will come when you look at someone who embodies your old wounds and feel not attraction, but compassion. Not desire, but understanding. Not need, but a gentle, knowing recognition. On that day, you'll realize the prophecy in this journey's title has come true. Nobody will ever hurt you again, not because others have changed, but because you have. You've learned to read the early signals, to honor your intuition, to value peace above familiar chaos, to recognize that true connection never requires the sacrifice of your dignity. Your wounds have become wisdom. Your patterns have transformed into protection. Your repetitions have evolved into discernment. What hurt you has, paradoxically, finally set you free. In the end, Freud's insight offers us not just understanding, but liberation. We repeat until we realize we can choose differently. We return to our wounds until we finally learn their lesson. And the lesson is always this: you were never meant to stay broken. The repetition was never your destiny. It was merely the unconscious trying to guide you home to yourself. Now you can put down the burden of that ancient pain. You can step away from the cycle that has claimed too many years. You can finally allow your future to be written by possibility, not trauma. This is your inheritance as a human being, the capacity to awaken, to grow, to transform, to take what hurt you and turn it into the very wisdom that ensures nobody will ever hurt you the same way again.